You know the opening scene. The hero wakes up in a hospital bed, walks outside, and finds the city beautifully, eerily silent. It makes for great cinema. But if millions of people attempt to flee a crisis at the exact same time, you aren't going to get silence. You're going to get a deafening wall of sound. The breakdown of critical infrastructure does not happen instantly like a light switch flipping off. It follows a predictable, cascading sequence of systemic failures. Looking at this emergency management report, we can track the recommended actions for those initial hours. Between hours 0 and 6, the power grid drops, Wi-Fi fails, cell towers overload. People naturally assume the outage is temporary and enter a disorientation phase, continuing their routines while waiting for the lights to come back on. Staying with this same report, you can see why the advice heavily emphasizes gathering intelligence and limiting travel. Between hours 6 and 12, the initial shock wears off. Without reliable news, an information vacuum takes over. Rumors spread and people rush to grocery stores and gas stations, causing massive gridlock. If you gather supplies and head into public spaces during this specific window, you walk directly into the panic. The exact instincts that reward you in a functioning society become active liabilities when those civil systems fail. By hour 12, the physical reality of the situation sets in. Refrigerators warm up, municipal water pumps lose pressure, and tap water stops flowing. Families suddenly realize they have to make a choice about how to survive the week. The standard survivalist instinct is to grab a packed bug-out bag, jump in a vehicle, and evacuate the urban core immediately. Looking at this survival documentation, the data points in the exact opposite direction. Staying put is statistically the superior choice. A home provides built-in insulation from the elements, space to store bulk water, and a physical barrier against violence. The classic 72-hour survival kit is simply inadequate for a systemic outage. Supply chains collapse within days, and preparedness experts warn that a grid-down scenario requires a minimum of 2 weeks of supplies to safely weather the initial shock. Walking away from your home with a backpack means trading a secure shelter for physical exhaustion and exposure on impassable roads. Locking your doors and bugging in offers a much higher chance of long-term viability. The need for resources drives people to locations that look great on screen, but serve as guaranteed death traps in real life. First up is the perfectly stocked abandoned supermarket weeks into a crisis. Think about how quickly retail spaces empty out during minor supply chain disruptions. In a true collapse, panic buying strips shelves bare in hours. Those quiet pantries turn into violent battlegrounds for whatever canned goods are left behind. When local scavenging fails, survivors often try to call for rescue. They climb up to an exposed rooftop and light a massive signal fire or a flare. This is a 4-step guide to getting yourself caught. You choose a highly exposed location, you create a bright beacon, you broadcast your exact coordinates, and you willingly throw away your single greatest defense, which is being invisible. A distress signal in a zero-rule environment does not selectively attract friendly helicopters. It alerts every hungry, desperate person in a multi-mile radius that someone up there has resources worth taking. Lighting a fire or scavenging in public signals your desperation to anyone watching. You take your best asset, anonymity, and turn it into a massive target on your back. If survivors do hear back from a distress call, it usually leads to the third major trap, a looped radio broadcast promising a military-run sanctuary. This is a predatory system designed to exploit exhaustion. It offers a warm bed and a secure perimeter, but the cost of admission is your absolute, unquestioning obedience. The warning signs are usually right there in the message. The communication is strictly one way, meaning you can't ask questions. The coordinates send you to a highly isolated location, and they offer incredible solutions, like a perfect cure to an infection, that sound way too good to be true. When one heavily armed faction controls all the food and dictates all the rules, they aren't rescuing you. You are trading your freedom for subjugation. A viable, long-term sanctuary requires a different approach entirely. You need defensible choke points and renewable resources, but above all else, you have to maintain a zero-profile footprint. Nobody can know you are there. This requires strict noise discipline. When the grid fails, the background hum of traffic and HVAC units disappears. In that silence, every squeak, footstep, or whispered conversation carries incredibly far. Looking at this diagram, we can see exactly why nighttime is so dangerous. On calm nights, a temperature inversion occurs. Cooler air settles near the ground, while a layer of warmer air acts like a lid above it. This traps acoustic and light waves, bending them back down, allowing far-off sounds to travel hundreds of meters clearly. According to this field guidance on sound suppression, maintaining stealth at home takes physical work. You have to pad high-traffic areas with rugs to absorb sound, build soundproofed generator boxes, and schedule your loudest tasks for the daytime when ambient noise masks them. Surviving a long-term crisis means accepting the grueling work of permanent concealment. You have to shut down your activity at night and stay completely off the radar. Much of modern prepping assumes that the second law and order break down, society will instantly fracture into violent, looting hordes. That assumption drives people toward the isolationist lone wolf strategy. The data shows something completely different. Psychologists track a phenomenon called catastrophe compassion. In the immediate aftermath of major disasters, property and violent crime rates actually decrease, and strangers consistently risk their lives to help one another. Reviewing this analysis on group dynamics, it becomes clear that communities don't fail because humans are inherently selfish. They collapse because of weak social networks and rigid, authoritarian leadership structures that fail to adapt under stress. This photograph of a disaster responder represents findings from organizations like Team Rubicon. Their field data proves that survivors who rely on cooperative networks drastically increase their collective odds of making it through the crisis. Trying to survive entirely alone ignores human nature. It means you have to stay awake to guard your own perimeter, leaving you exhausted, isolated, and highly vulnerable to a single medical mistake. This matrix chart plots long-term survival against strategic profile. The heavily armed lone wolf sits in a high-risk quadrant. Tactical gear cannot compensate for physical exhaustion. The highest survival probability belongs to pragmatic planners, building a resilient, zero-profile sanctuary. True preparedness relies on resilience and social connections. When civil systems vanish, the most dangerous threat might be a desperate human being, but your greatest resource will always be a neighbor you've built the trust to rely on.